Welcome back to Casual Talk Radio, Gentlemen's World Podcast. My name is Leister. Today, as I said, this is a rare occurrence, by the way. I don't do a lot of YouTube videos for Casual Talk Radio, largely because there's a lot of work still being done under the hood for the entire brand and more of a focus on Combat Talk Radio, which it needed more focus. You can always catch our podcasts at casualtalkradio.net. We record podcasts every Monday and Wednesday. So if you are interested in content, that's where we are. YouTube is more of a kind of these afterthoughts every now and then. There may be once a month, maybe, but you will not get the same frequency as with the podcast side. But something was brought to attention and I couldn't help but discuss it. I had to. And it has to do with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, recently released on the Nintendo Switch. And just for all disclosure, I couldn't stand Breath of the Wild. I thought Breath of the Wild was absolute crap, personally. I never played Minish Cap. I never played Ocarina of Time. The only one I played through completion, I played the first one for sure. I played the second one for sure. I played Link to the Past to completion, but I don't remember it. Never played Wind Waker because I couldn't stand the graphics. I tried Twilight Princess, but I couldn't get fully into it, although I did enjoy its graphics. So I have kind of this mixed history with the series. The one that was on the original Wii, you had to swing the freaking, I couldn't stand that crap. Never played it all the way through. I played it, but couldn't tolerate it. Link's Awakening, I saw it. I was like, okay, this doesn't work for me, brother. And then most recently, whichever the one is that released, that's the one in the sky. I tried it, but I got to a point and I couldn't stomach it. No, it just doesn't work. So I'm not a Zelda fan. That's what I'm getting at. But I had my eye on Tears of the Kingdom because people claimed that Tears of the Kingdom, quote, fixed the flaws of Breath of the Wild. This caught my eye. Is it true that it fixed the flaws of Breath of the Wild? In order to quantify this, we have to try to describe the flaws of the game in the first place. I was disappointed to see all of the professional reviewers come out and essentially give the damn thing at least an 80, but pretty much 100 otherwise across the board. And I know damn well this is not a 100 perfect score game. So I already knew they probably weren't paid because I don't think Nintendo does that. I think what happens is there's this bias. The bias is, and I've noticed this with other gamers, the bias is that certain people will score a game based on what they specifically like about a game. I actually was talking to someone on GameFAQs. It's a terrible site, by the way. And he said essentially something to the effect that he doesn't care about story. He doesn't care about the graphics that much. He doesn't care about the music. All he cares about is the battle engine, the gameplay. That's all he cares about. So I can't imagine the level of degradation that we've experienced in games. It used to be that people like the overall experience. Like, you remember, we're being asked to invest $60 plus for a lot of these things. And the vast majority of meat for the game is cut out to DLC. So for me, I need $60 worth of overall experience. My overall experience is you damn sure better have English dub, not sub, dub. I want English voices. I don't even care if they're questionable. I want English voices because I speak English. I want cutscenes. I want to be able to put the controller down and enjoy a story told to me. They don't have to be amazing graphics. I certainly don't want realistic looking garbage. They just need to be good details, well done. I can see they took the time to figure this out. And most importantly, probably critically for me, characters and plot, tell me about this world, develop it for me. Make me give a damn about the characters in the game. So you're asking yourself, okay, what's an example of a game that checks the box for you? Trails of Cold Steel 1 and Trails of Cold Steel 2 are up there near the top, not the top, but near the top of my list of those games that seem to do everything right. Where they fell short, they lacked the auto advanced text, which I think is critical. I desperately need this. And the only game that I can think of that checked every box for me at the time was Dragon Quest VIII. It checked every box. It did everything I wanted in a game 100% balls to bones, start to finish, including random battles. So others say, well, you just like random battles or turn based. No, that's not true. Secret of Mana, not turn based, not random battles, one of the best of all time. I'll even give you a secret. Evermore wasn't amazing, but it was a pretty good game compared to what we have now. Ease 8, YS 8, top 10 all time. I love that game. I love everything about it. So no, it's not about turn-based or not. It's just I want the overall experience. I have to care about the characters, care about the world, care about the story. It's not just fighting. It's got to be a total experience because it's got to be worth my $60. I make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. It's not that I'm broke. It's not that I can't afford them. I don't justify paying or telling the developer it's worth that money unless it checks all the boxes for me. So Breath of the Wild, no, it's basically a sandbox. Does it have a decent story? It's a decent story, but there's not enough for me to really care about everybody. So I then got the one that's Age of Calamity. I have that one. I still couldn't get into it. So I already knew this wasn't for me. But I was trying to understand this whole hundreds across the board. And guess what I found? Turns out others see and have exposed all these different reviewers, and they see what I see, which is, no, it's not this amazing 100. It actually has some flaws. And I want to talk about some of the feedback that some of these people are saying. And I'd love to hear from anybody who contradicts what this is saying. If you've played it and you disagree with these, and I'm just sharing what they're saying, I'd love to hear from you. Because what I saw from the videos, the various videos I see, is that you got a game that's nothing more than a sandbox. I saw somebody make the connection to Minecraft, essentially, and it's lacking on story, lacking on plot, nowhere near as plot rich as any of the other Zeldas that have come to date. And that's sad because although I didn't like a lot of the Zeldas, I recognize there's a very rich story behind the vast majority of them. And seeing that that's gone is disappointing to me at least, but I want to hear from you guys to help me understand, is it truly that the story has gone to nothing or crap and they just made a Minecraft sandbox and that's what people are praising and they're not going off the total experience? Here's what people are saying that I'd like you to speak about. User S&M Black says, quote, "This is not a Zelda at all. Puzzles, puzzles, stop." Of course, Zelda games are all known for puzzles. I think every last one of them, except for the one on Wii, was about puzzles. So I question why he doesn't think it's Zelda when it's got puzzles. Quote, "I came from work to spend 5 hours doing Minecraft-style works," unquote. So that's what I'm asking. Is that basically all it is a sandbox of Minecraft-type tasks? Quote, if I want to build something, there are many games in the market that can help with that. Breath of Wild had this issue as well. What about the story? Isn't it supposed to be urgent to reach Zelda and Ganon? Nah, you can pick up materials in Apple to cook slow. I strongly don't recommend this or Breath of the Wild as your first Zelda. Fortunately, I can play Minish Cap now on the Switch. For Tears of Kingdom, I'm gonna sail it. That's what he said. Doesn't worth your money. Stop. So that's what I'm asking. This person implies that there's no urgency to reach Zelda or Ganon. I would argue Breath of the Wild had the same problem. You had this whole thing happen in the beginning. You're told that Zelda's holding it back, but you can literally take as long as you want and do anything you want before you head to Hyrule Castle. So there was no real urgency to reach Zelda and Ganon. So Breath of the Wild had the same problem. So I don't think it's a Tears of the Kingdom specific issue is my point. User Lord Vacant says, quote, "A disappointing sequel in many ways. And I plan to justify my points. Recycle content. This game took 3 more times development than Majora's Mask compared to Ocarina in its time, and even so, everything that has been superficial Hyrule is too blatantly recycled, while in Majora's, the entire Termina region was new, not counting the great amount of animations, sound effects, and negative aspects of Breath of the Wild, such as saturation of Kolog seeds, I think he means Korok seeds, as a repetitive task. So recycle content. I see almost all over the place, people are complaining that it's the same world. It's the same map. You're going to the same places. They didn't give you any new places to explore. So what is it, the overhype here? The irony is, I actually recently called Tales of Ionius it's not a bad game, but it's not a Xenoblade game. It's released as, quote, Xenoblade Chronicles 3, but that game is not a Xenoblade game. I said it 50 million times in my reviews on GameFAQs. People attacked me always to Sunday. The DLC Wave 4 comes out, and it is Xenoblade Chronicles 3. mostly because the landmarks are names that you recognize. It has characters that you recognize that you actually care about. It has great cutscenes, fantastic music, really good gameplay. It's an amazing DLC, almost better than Torna from Xenoblade 2. But it is true that you do go to map locations that were the same locations as Xenoblade 1 and Future Connected. So, yes, that's true. That's actually the appeal of the game. You're going to recognize locations. People trashed on the DLC because it was the same map, but then all of a sudden, Tears of the Kingdom does the same thing and it gets praised for going to the same locations. People are not consistent, and that's what bothers me in gaming today. Quote, story. Incredibly, and despite the fact that people complained about it in the previous title, the plot and the narrative still don't resemble to more classic Zeldas. It's still very empty in this aspect and with very flat characters, and if we talk about the final battle, it's very disappointing and on the same level of Breath of the Wild. So, what the person's saying is that the story is basically nothing. The story is not even priority. The story isn't improved. The story is the same, and the story is basically nowhere close to what classic Zelda's brought to attention, which was a focus on story. I'd love to hear if that's really the case, because that's disappointing, especially since they're charging $70. Quote, graphics and performance. 6 years hardly justify that technically it still looks like a Wii U game. In my playtime, it was rare not to be less than 30 frames a second and with an occasional stuttering as soon as the screen was filled with elements, which is too occasional due to construction mechanics. So, of course, Breath of the Wild struggled with frame rate. Age of Calamity struggled with frame rate. It's inherent to the engine, and since it's stuck on the Nintendo Switch, it was expected. I'm not going to hold that against Tears of the Kingdom because no matter what, they're stuck on hardware that, for whatever reason, they refuse to release a Switch Pro. Quote, weapon fragility. Weapons in general are still glass-like and don't last with you at all, making it frustrating to get better weapons or a specific set. Everybody has generally complained about the destruction of weapons, that they just wear out and they blow up, and that was a complaint on Breath of the Wild. However, on this game, despite the fact that they kept that mechanic, they're still giving hundreds to this game, higher scores for this game than for Breath of the Wild. Why is that? If it's such a bad mechanic that the weapons destroy and self-implode, why is it that you're giving them hundreds when they have not fixed this underlying issue? Quote, in summary, this Zelda has not managed to correct everything that I disliked about Breath of the Wild, and since it was a game that was so late, there's no justification. In my personal opinion, it was a torment to play. I can't say yay or nay. I'd love to hear from people what they think on this one. User Distant Kingdom says, quote, the press and journalists doesn't say, this is spelling, that's what they said, something very bad about the game, and it is the immense amount of recycled material that it has and how mediocre it runs on the Switch. The amount of pop-ins is impressive. It's very frustrating that for $70, a large percentage of the game feels the same as the previous one, except for some playable gimmicks that also don't change the game experience. Once again, recycled elements and performance come into play. These were not called out by the professional reviewers, and I'd like to know why. User Genji1 says, quote, overrated sequel. It's just Breath of the Wild with some minor additions. And why are breakable weapons still a thing in this game? Once again, with breakable weapons. User Frelurter says, quote, not a Zelda game anymore, but a sandbox game. Never in a million years would I imagine a Zelda game where I rotate objects and stick them together like Minecraft, and it's even worse controlling it with a controller. I miss the old Zelda. User Awestruck says, quote, the game reuses nearly everything from Breath of the Wild. Map is mostly unchanged. You still progress by collecting Korok seeds, completing shrines, and going to towers that unlock map fragments and act as waypoints. They totally overstated the presence of dungeons. Dungeons are essentially glorified divine beasts. Overall, it feels like a DLC, and for $70, it's absolutely not worth the price tag. So, step up here, right? I think the price is why people are so frustrated, and the feeling that it's a glorified DLC. If you have feedback about that, I'd love to hear from you. Does it feel like a glorified DLC? Don't go off whether you like it or not. Go off whether there's $70 worth of a game, given if what they're saying is true, that it's the same map, same experience, same towers, etc. Is it feeling like a DLC that should be more closely to like $30 that could have been just a slapped-on DLC to Breath of the Wild, as opposed to a dramatically different new experience that's worth $60 or even $70? The last one I'll talk about here, user only one here says, quote, and I'm not going to read all of what they say, I'm just going to hit some spotlights here. This game is a huge steaming pile of garbage. The greedy developers are charging $70 for a mobile game. Does it feel like a mobile game to you? And I'm not talking just performance, I'm talking overall, that a phone could pull off what you see. I disagree, but I'd like to know what you think. Quote, there's nothing to do in the open world. It's just a boring, empty landscape of plants, trees, rocks, water, and mountains. It's the same map of Breath of the Wild. All they did was edit the map a bit with the creator tools and called it a day. And no, the map under the world and the Sky Islands don't count as new maps. So, of course, you got the Sky Islands, and that's new, and then apparently there's underground. Is it significantly enough to justify a $70 price tag? That's the question that we're trying to ask here. Quote, the fact that this low-budget, rehashed garbage got a 96 proves there's double standards and hypocrisy among these critics. Let's be honest with ourselves. Forget the PS5. Forget the Xbox X. Forget the price tag. If this were just a PS4 and Xbox One game for $60 that didn't have the Legend of Zelda title, the narrative would have been different. There's no way it would have scored higher than 75. This game would be crucified by critics for low-budget graphics, poor draw distance, bad lip syncing, low unstable frame rate, and lack of innovation. Gamers would be roasting it by calling it a PS2 game. And these journalists had the audacity to rant and virtue signal over studios crunching, even though they're the main reason why the crunch exists in the first place, because every studio has to work at least 100 times harder than Nintendo to get a 90 score. So I love what the person's saying there. He called out a lot of stuff here. Low budget graphics, is that true? Draw distance issues, is that true? Bad lip syncing, is that true? Frame rate seems like everybody talks about. Lack of innovation, nothing significantly changed. Is that true? The innovation one, man, you can probably question, but all the other stuff, again, boils down to the question. Is it worth $70 as a standalone game, or is the price value more akin to a $30 DLC of Breath of the Wild? The other stuff they were talking about is multiplayer. I don't care about multiplayer, so whatever. All in summary, again, I was not a fan of Breath of the Wild. I don't see the appeal. I know people like open world games these days. I don't. I like to play a book. I want to see somebody's story. I want to see somebody's creativity. I care less about the gameplay than I do the story, the world, the characters, the plot. That's what I want. But I also want the total experience. If it has a good battle engine, I'm fine with it. That's why Ys 8 is up there in one of my top 10 all time, because it did everything right. It's got cutscenes. It's got, in some cases, anime, but mostly cutscenes. It's got voice acting, English voice acting. It's actually pretty good. The battle engine is pretty good. The story is actually pretty good. The characters are recognizable and memorable. Everything just works. So for me, that's what I like. I know some other people, that's not what they like. They don't like the linearity. They don't like the structure. And certainly some people just love the open world. I can do what I want and you're not forcing me into a thing. Games. I actually wouldn't have a problem with those games as long as it's got everything else. If it's got cutscenes and English voice acting, and, characters I give a damn about, then I don't care. But I don't see this game having those. I'd love to hear from anybody out there that has the game and has played the game, just to answer the question. And it's the only question I'm trying to get to. Is Tears of the Kingdom worth $70 as a standalone experience? Or if you're honest, I'm talking if you're honest and unbiased, is it really more akin to a $30 DLC and you're really being ripped off, not just because I like it, not just because I'm having fun. I'm talking in terms of the totality of what was just talked about. Reused assets, frame rate issues, draw distance issues, not very many new maps. That's one, and the last battle apparently is not that good. If all of these taken in a macro level, is it true, if you're honest, that yeah, this probably should have been a $30 DLC to Breath of the Wild, and it does not feel like a brand new $70 game? I'd love to hear from anybody who has some insight, who's playing the game. Give me your thoughts, because I'm not making a stance either way. I'm genuinely curious myself. I could get the game right now, but I'm held back by the feedback that I'm hearing, because if it's really no different than Breath of the Wild, there's no way I can justify $70 for that, because it's not fixing the flaws of Breath of the Wild. And that's what I'd love to hear some other voices about.